Christian living in, let's say, Los Angeles, your idea of who Jesus is, of what Jesus means, is profoundly different than if you're a Christian living in the hills of Guatemala. If you're a Muslim living in Los Angeles, your conception of Islam as a religion of peace, as a religion that prescribes, peacefulness and tolerance and pluralism, that's going to be vastly different than if you're a Muslim living in a garbage heap in Gaza. So it's not just simply verbal sophistry to say that there are much more significant aspects that define one's political or social views, that lead one to even acts of violence, than just merely religion. Religion does not explain solely why someone decides to strap a bomb to themselves and kill combatants or non-combatants, however it would be. And it's, I think, a profoundly simplistic way of thinking about not just religion, but about these social conflicts themselves.
Reza, I'd like to focus you on one of the implications of what you're saying. One of the most remarkable phenomena of recent history has been the rapprochement between Israel and the PLO, which was formerly vilified as a satanic force in the world, as terrorists and murderers. And suddenly, by comparison with Hamas, PLO seems like a very desirable partner for peace, to the extent that Israel is entertaining releasing men that they put in jail for terrorist acts so that they can turn their weapons against Hamas. And the reason is that with PLO, an organization with nationalist aspirations, one can negotiate a state, and the state will satisfy their demands. With Hamas, which has a much more expansive cosmic view of the struggle, there is no basis for a negotiated peace. Is that not an example of where injecting religion into a political conflict raises the stakes? That's a phrase.
One of many, many examples. I would say, however, that it's important to recognize that the Israelis reached out and negotiated with the PLO long before Hamas was a serious organization of any kind. And not, again, because they thought, well, the PLO is better than Hamas. It's because the social aspects changed. Suddenly it was politically expedient in order to negotiate with the PLO, and so suddenly the terminology of them as a death squad of suicide bombers or of fanatics that could not be talked to, that kind of rhetoric fluttered away. So I mean, to me, that sort of in many ways strengthens what I'm talking about when I say that we cannot in any way think of religion as existing solely in a vacuum. That's what I meant by religion is by definition interpretation.
I don't. But again, if the poorest, most molested people were by and large the jihadists and the engineers and the architects and the doctors, the people who had a benefit of the good life, were disproportionately moderate, then this analysis of yours would make some sense. But we have someone like Ayman al-Zawahiri, right? A surgeon. He comes from one of the most respected families in Egypt. He's got doctors and judges and pharmacists as far as the eye can see. He is not an exception. He is not. If you correct for literacy in the Muslim world, support for suicide bombing goes up. I mean, this is the most radicalized people are not the people who, in particular, you can see this in microcosm when you actually look at the biographies of the 19 hijackers. These were all college educated. Many of them had PhDs. I mean, it's just not religion really is separable as the most important variable. And what is actually right on the surface to be seen is that these people are telling us what is motivating them. The jihadis are talking all day long about the pleasures that await martyrs in paradise, the horrors of living in proximity with the infidels, the desecration of the Muslim holy sites by the proximity of infidel troops on the ground. I mean, this is, Osama bin Laden tells us what motivates him. He's telling us why he's not living in Paris and dating models with his inheritance. I mean, he is being quite articulate ad nauseum. And so to deny the role that religion is playing, I would never for a moment say that there are not poor, mistreated people driven to extremis and to extreme violence for reasons other than religion. Of course, that happens. But this is a separable component which we have rendered, by the terms of our discourse, by our emotional attachment to it, immune to criticism. It is taboo to say that the Quran is bogus as a document that describes the history of the evolution of our species, as a document that makes really cogent prescriptions about how to live in the 21st century, as is the Bible. Almost entirely bogus if you're going to take it as a text to live by. It is taboo to say that. You could not possibly get elected in this country if you even openly doubted whether or not there was a creator God listening to the prayers of your constituents. I mean, this is the world we are living in, and it's
well, Sam, I have to say, I'm not sure what world you're living in, but if it were taboo to say those things, then I don't think you would have sold 500,000 copies of your book.
500,000 copies is the 25 million copies of The Purpose-Driven Life being sold. I mean,
those are vastly different books and vastly different audiences.
Yes.
But I think, look, Zawahiri, and I'm so glad that you brought this up, because Zawahiri wasn't a jihadist until he was placed in the dank and sadistic prisons of Egypt and tortured, and then when he came out, then he became a jihadist.
Well, that's actually not true.
No, it's absolutely true.
Well,
he was a member.
Read The Looming Tower.
I know Lawrence Wright. We've talked about this. He himself, Zawahiri, was, of course, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. But the Muslim Brotherhood is not a jihadist organization.
Close enough, by my lights.
That, again, indicates the profound unsophistication that you have about this region. To think that there is a connection between the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and Al-Qaeda, that they are exactly the same thing. Or
I'm not saying they're the same thing, but
that they're close
the ideology is so close in its divisiveness.
You could not be more wrong in that case.
Well, we've read the same book.
This is not the issue. The issue isn't that poor people become suicide bombers. Everybody knows that that's not true. Mm-hmm. The point is that, and you read Bin Laden, his justifications for the terrorist acts are not religious justifications.
They're not?
No, not at all. He says very clearly, it's because of Palestine, it's because of troops in Saudi Arabia, it's because of now what's going on in Iraq. Now these, we can say, are false constructs, that he doesn't really mean these things, and certainly he's never done anything to help.
But they're theological grievances.
No, they're not, and that is exactly where I think you're misunderstanding what's happening. They're social grievances, they are political grievances, they are economic grievances, and like everybody on earth, they are framed in the language of religion. You know, we stand here in the United States, one of the most religious countries in the world, as Sam, you certainly know, a country in which we are perfectly comfortable when our politicians, even those that are nominally religious, use the most distinct religious language to talk about purely social or economic or political issues. It's perfectly normal for us because, of course, we understand that that kind of language is the language that holds the most currency with the masses. We are, of course, embroiled in a war between good and evil, are we not? I mean, again, but somehow when a member of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt uses the same kind of religious language to talk about his economic agenda, we immediately label it as theocratic or Islamist or fundamentalist in some way. There are people who have, legitimately or not, very serious grievances with what they see as or how they understand a legitimate resistance to what they view as an attack upon their very identities. And of course, identity goes far deeper than just simply cultural or social or national or religious. It's a combination of those things.